Welcome to the Doktor O'Kay Show. I'm Doktor O'Kay, and this is SmackDown from Memphis, Tennessee, where our main headline is Just Keep Getting It Twisted. But we'll get to that in a minute, so let's start with our first match and just keep puckering until you get that kiss, because Bianca Belair tried over and over for a kiss of death until she finally got Piper on the turnbuckle to lift and land it, so she earns a spot in the Elimination Chamber, which makes Bianca the ones, and she seemingly just wanted to prove that she could hold up Piper on her shoulders, and sure enough, she did, landing that KOD on her fourth try, and that of course is all it took. So she gets her third straight win and goes to 1-0 in 2025. And that means Piper is the twos, and she grabbed Bianca's braid early. That seemed to work because she hit a cross body up against the side of the ring and then a senton on the floor. And later on, she had a Uranagi and a splash. But at the end of the day, she's right back to the norm after winning her last match, and she is 1-2 in one-on-one action. Now, interestingly enough, yet again, Chelsea did not help her secret Hervis member, and it's getting a little interesting at this point. But this was too much of a one-trick pony show, so it has to get a not okay. In our second match, we just keep taking a moment of suckitude as the ref is impervious to the rules as he lets Ciampa and then Prince both grab the rope to try to get a pin, and it was pretty deadly. Who is the ones, and those who cheat last cheat best. And as Wilson booted Ciampa off of his roll-up when Ciampa was grabbing the rope, then Prince immediately turned it around with a roll-up of his own, grabbing the top rope himself to score a rare victory. But because the ref was about a foot away and yet missed two straight calls right back to back, yeah, he gets a "what were you thinking?" But nonetheless, for Pretty Deadly, this is their first win since March of 2024, and that means they had 8 straight losses, but this somehow makes them the #1 contender, and that makes DIY the twos after they were forced to compete in street clothes by Nick Aldis after Pretty Deadly rudely interrupted their moment of silence. But I think they'll be more ready when the titles are on the line and they go to 1-1 in traditional tags. This was simply an unacceptable call by the GM that led to an absurd result and also a terrible job by the ref, so it gets a double not okay. Third, we just keep making a statement by leaving a toxic work environment as Drew McIntyre officially moves to SmackDown in the transfer window, and then Claymore's LA Knight in the back of the head during a BFT, so he wins a triple threat match to qualify for the Elimination Chamber. That makes McIntyre the ones, and he said he's feeling much better after leaving Raw, and he made an immediate impact, and he also had the move of the night with an incredible double superplex while he was seemingly stuck in the Tree of Woe, and this certainly deserved "this is awesome" chance. And then of course he ended it with that crafty Claymore to get a much needed win, and he improves to 2-3 in singles matches. That means Big Jim is the twos, and he landed a super kick and an Uso splash on Knight, but then McIntyre yanked the ref's legs to stop the count. And then of course he couldn't connect on a second Uso splash, so he falls to 3-1 in singles matches. And then LA Knight is the threes, and he must not like what he sees because McIntyre snuffed out that superplex early and then the BFT at the end, so he takes a rare loss on SmackDown, dropping now to 2-2 in singles matches, but at least he called Drew a Mackin crier before the match. But while this was not as awesome as the crowd thought it was, it still gets an okay. Next, we just keep shooting at the 8-foot hoop because Carmelo Hayes overcomes Akira Tozawa with a springboard DDT and a nothing but net to put a few points on the board. And that means Hayes is the one as he tried to dodge another fight with an unknown opponent before he found out that that was Akira Tozawa. And yet, he still struggled for most of the match, before a buzzer-beating flurry, so he does improve to 1, 2, and 1 in one-on-one matches. And Akira Tozawa is the 2s, and he got a chance for some revenge after the Royal Rumble and almost paid it off with a dropkick of Hayes off of the apron during Hayes' ring entrance, and then slammed him against the barricade a few times. That will cost Tozawa a very rare fine, but it was almost worth it, and he almost got this win after a sunset flip powerbomb, but it was not quite enough, so he hasn't won a singles match in 12 and a half months and is 0-1 in 2025. And this was actually a good match, but the problem is that it was a good match, instead of one where Hayes was actually able to dominate, which is something that he thinks he probably should do. And this was his one chance to impress with a quick win, but he couldn't do it. So I'll give it an okay, but man, Hayes continues to fail to impress to show any progress. And in our main headline, but not the main event, we just keep getting it twisted as Alexa Bliss has her first one-on-one match in over 2 years and summons her inner demons with an Abigail DDT to immediately advance to the Elimination Chamber. And yes, Alexa is the ones with a couple classic goddess moves early on, including her insult to injury, but after taking a code breaker to the skull, something snapped inside of her to fire her up, and that led to that Abigail DDT, and so she gets her first win since December 12th, 2022. But I do want to take a moment here because I'm not sure why Alexa needs to forego the classic Sister Abigail to underhook that arm, which takes longer to do. And I also thought it was called the Twisted Abigail because that just sounds way better than Abigail DDT. But regardless, no matter what it looks like and no matter what it's called, the win's the thing that we need to see, and sure enough, we saw it. And that makes Candice the 2s, and she seemingly out-wrestled Alexa early on with 2 back-stretching submissions, and she had a nice step-up enziguri near the end, but she still found a way to get caught with that Abigail, so she goes to 0-2 in singles matches, and so far in 2025, she's the only wrestler with at least 4 matches who has 0 wins. So rust was a little bit of a factor early on for Alexa, but she simply got knocked in the head, and that kicked her into another gear, so this is a good start for her, and she gets an okay. And in our main event, we just keep spiking the ball as Sikoa returns with an emphatic Samoan spike to make a statement that he's not done yet. But for the match, Rhodes and Jey Uso are the ones as Jey neutralized Fatu by yanking his legs out of the ring, then landing a super kick and tossing him over the announce table. That allowed Rhodes to send Tonga to the crossroads. So the former tag champs and potential WrestleMania foes get their first win since October of 2023, so they are 1-0 in traditional tags. That means Fatu and Tonga are again the 2s, and they almost had it after Tonga had a head shrinker DDT and then assisted Fatu with a super kick, but they were outsmarted by Jey, so they are surprisingly just 1-2 in traditional tags. But this was wrapped up with Sikoa's shocking return, spiking the ball in the end zone, which is a super way to end SmackDown, and his eyes are apparently back on the grandest prize, so Sikoa will have to get a fine. But after having 3 Elimination Chamber qualifiers, there was nothing really at stake here, and it showed, so this gets a not okay. And with that, let's go beyond the mat for SmackDown, and we'll kind of start there because at the top of the show, Jey Uso started things off yet again, and it took him almost 11 minutes before he said anything, which is an improvement from Raw when it took 14 minutes, but still pretty terrible. But Jey told Rhodes that he had a choice to either stand across from him at WrestleMania or stand with him with both as champs afterwards. Nonetheless, the Tongans interrupted with Fatu saying that the family needs that title back, and it sure won't be Jey Uso to be the one to take it from Rhodes. But that just made Jey angry, and he super kicked Tonga, so Jey is the one who we're gonna find here. But of course, they all brawled, with Jey and Rhodes getting the best of Fatu with a Cody Cutter and a double clothesline to clear the ring. But at least Fatu has the title in his sights, but Jey simply took too long yet again with no new ground covered, so this gets a not okay. Jey then later in the show told Rhodes that he is simply undecided for WrestleMania, which he said right after R-Truth dropped Tozawa right after his match and called Jey the King of the Ring, but Truth, yet again, always on point and always okay. In addition to McIntyre, Aldis briefly spoke to Carter and Chance in his office, and apparently they will also be going to the Blue Brand, and we can't get less time for them than they have on Raw recently, so this is definitely for us. Okay. Even after his loss last week, The Miz still tried to convince Andrade again to join him, but unfortunately for him, Andrade again declined, instead saying that he just learned how to beat The Miz. But then The Miz turned his attention to Rhodes, and he said that Jey also has a great story to finish at WrestleMania, and he said that while Nakamura was again lurking in the background, but this whole thing gets a not okay. Byron Saxton interviewed Damian Priest, who said he will take care of McIntyre in the Elimination Chamber, but Strowman pointed out that Priest is jumping the gun because he first has to beat the monster himself, as well as a wild animal in Jacob Fatu in their qualifying match next week. And while this match certainly sounds amazing, this short interaction is not okay. Kevin Owens had another car video, and he showed off his scars on his face and the pain on the inside that he will have to carry with him for the rest of his life, saying that this is all Sami Zayn's fault because he simply stood there and watched while Rhodes tried to end his career, or even worse. But just a few minutes later, he rushed to the aid of Roman Reigns simply because someone was beating him up during the Royal Rumble. And so KO called him a horrible friend and a disgusting human being, and so he will never forgive him, and he will make Zayn pay. Now, KO, I will say one thing, this isn't all Zayn's fault, because of course you could have won this match cleanly, but for the most part the rest of it's all spot on, because Zayn has indeed lost his way and KO will need to set him straight. But that might just take a while because Zayn is ruled out indefinitely with spinal compression and nerve damage, so KO yet again double okay. And speaking of injuries, Paul Heyman refused to answer the phone despite several attempts by the WWE to get an update on Roman Reigns' condition, and both of them are extremely pathetic and not even worthy of getting an okay or not okay. But we did have Charlotte Flair making her grand return to SmackDown, and she said that whether you love her or hate her, she is living rent-free in everyone's mind, and I mean, yes please, that is completely fine. And then of course Tiffany Stratton interrupted, and she said she's been compared to Charlotte her entire career, and she wants Charlotte to pick her so that they no longer have to compare the two. But then Nia Jax interrupted, saying that this was premature because she will finally get her rematch next week for the title against Tiffy. So Charlotte said she will be there next week, and yeah, I'm glad we're getting this rematch, and I'm glad that those two were finally face to face, and Charlotte can always be rent-free in my mind, so this gets an okay. And after Chelsea told Byron Saxton that she would beat Naomi next week in her elimination qualifier match, B-Fab, Michin, and then Zelina all interrupted Chelsea and said that they want the title, so Chelsea told Piper that she's supposed to get a bigger security detail, so we'll see if the Secret Harvest member can come through with that, and for now that gets an okay. The Street Profits had a vignette where they have their eyes on both the Machine Guns and DIY, with Dawkins saying that every time they get close to the titles, someone gets in the way, and of course they very resolutely want that smoke, so this too gets an okay. And lastly, but still in the tag division, Los Garza interrupted the Machine Guns interview, saying that it is time for some new teams to get a chance. But then Elektra and also Escobar then also walked in, and they told the Machine Guns if they want to fight, they got it. A little clunky, I have to say, with all of them not just all showing up at once, so it gets a not okay. We got both Charlotte and Alexa inside a SmackDown ring for the first time in a very long time, and so it simply does not get much better than that. But if you want to see how much better that stupid idiot SportsZu thinks he would have done than the actual Royal Rumble, then be sure to go right on over here and check that out. But for now, since Charlotte and Alexa both were let back in, this gets an okay.